Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, I've got a really exciting one. We're jumping into a beer from Listermann Brewing. I reviewed quite a few beers of theirs in the past. This is a brand new beer to me. It is called 11, and it is an Imperial Pastry Stout that clocks in at 11% ABV. It has been brewed with waffles, maple syrup, and lactose. Listermann Brewing Company is based in Cincinnati, Ohio. So first things first, bottle art. It may be hard to tell, but it is kind of foil, and it looks like a young lady standing with a box of Eggos in her hand and a bunch of waffles on the ground. So I am gathering that if you're a Stranger Things fan, you may already be seeing where they're going with this. 11, the name, of course, of the main character in that show. Massive waffle fan, and 11% ABV on the dot that they achieved. So I'm liking the vibe they're going with this. And honestly, waffles, maple syrup, and lactose sounds like a really good recipe for a pastry stout. So we drink a lot of different stouts. I've had quite a few pastry stouts that I've reviewed on this channel. And what is a pastry stout? Well, really, it's kind of a sub-style, but it's all under the umbrella. Typically, they're going to be more dessert-like or specific kind of confection-type stouts most of the time, but not always. Most of the time, they do have lactose, so that milk sugar will help bring out the flavors that went into it, hence the pastry. So in this case, we've got waffles, maple syrup, and lactose. Sounds awesome to me. So let's get this cracked. All right, and pour it right in the glass. Ooh, that's way darker and thicker than I was anticipating. I am genuinely surprised by that. Wow. Oh, that is dark. That is rich. Man, that formed just a lush, incredible head too. Wow. That's one of the best heads on a stout I've poured in a long time. Visually, absolutely pitch black. I can tell you the aroma is quite pungent. I could smell it as soon as I got it poured in the glass, but let's get right up on it for a proper sniff. So you're really picking up the maple, and there's a nice roasty edge from the backbone. Now, I can't say, oh yeah, I smell waffles. That's a little ridiculous just due to the nature of waffles, but for sure, you can smell the maple, and you can smell the intense roast that's on this malt bill. It is pitch black, so I'm expecting a nice bit of intensity, but that lactose is going to let the maple come out really clearly, and hopefully the waffles that they threw into here. I'm really excited. This sounds awesome. This head is as thick and rich as creamy as it gets. So zero doubt it's going to make a giant mess in my beard, but we're just going to live with it. We're going to jump right in. God, it smells good. Ooh, ooh, that's big. Okay, wow, yeah. Okay, yeah. So, yes, you can taste the waffles quite clearly. It does taste like buttered waffles covered in maple syrup. And they added enough lactose to let those ingredients speak in the beer, but not so much that you couldn't get the underlying ridiculously rich malt bill that they used for this beer. So, it's almost reminding me of like if you were drinking a cup of dark, really roasty, like a French or Italian roast coffee, black, with your pile of buttered maple syrup topped waffles. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting out of this beer, and it's absolutely delicious. And there's no real sense of booziness to it at all. 11%, that's pretty high. It is Imperial. There's not really a boozy sense. So really, it's all about the flavor and the intensity of flavor, kind of how they start to open up and work together. That's really what this beer is about for me, and I think it's absolutely delicious. So, first thing I noticed was as I was agitating around the palate, just how resistant and viscous this beer was, as well as when you really start to agitate to let the flavors coat the palate, it gets ridiculously velvety, very, very creamy, even more thick. In terms of mouthfeel. In terms of what happens on first sip, you're hit immediately with a wall of maple syrup. It's just intensity of maple, and it's truly delicious. It's got the right amount of lactose to let the maple come through without it being astringently sweet. Behind that comes the waffles, and yeah, maybe it's coming from elements of the malt bill that are pairing and how everything's paired together, but it does taste like properly buttered waffles covered in maple syrup. That's really the vibe I got. And then as the intensity on that starts to dial back just a tick, that's when there's this big rush up from the malt bill, and you can really taste the depth of the roast, the intensity of the roast on that malt bill. Like I said, it really does most remind me of this entire cohesive flavor unit, remind me of if I were eating a stack of buttered waffles with maple syrup on top, and I had a big old cup of pitch black Italian or French roast coffee that I was drinking alongside it. That is the flavor profile. It's absolutely delicious. It's breakfast in beer form in a glass, and it's tremendous. So I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to think a little bit on the body. I got the mouthfeel that was very evident up front, but the flavor was so intense I really stopped thinking about what I was getting from my other senses. So we're going to jump in, explore the body, see what happens with these flavors as they intensify in second sip, and we're going to pick apart the finish as well. Absolutely delicious. The flavor intensity is just insane. Okay, the body on this is a solid medium heavy. It's got a good bit of breadth. In fact, it's a little heavier than I would expect for just 11% on a stout. Just as the mouthfeel is very viscous. Really, it's more viscous and resistant than you would expect, and that lush, velvety, silky smooth thickness and creaminess when you agitate is really quite welcome. It pairs well in this. Everything in this beer just works together. I love the structure of it, the interplay of the ingredients, how they all just kind of work in one seamless, cohesive kind of unit, and it's tremendous. And I've had multiple sips of this, obviously. You can see that head, while it's not as ridiculously tall because I've upset it with the natural oils in my beard, it's still got a really thick pad floating on top and tons of cling on the sides. That's really one of the best heads and retention I've seen in a long time on any beer. Honestly, this is just great. The finish, it's quite long, as you might expect. The intensity of flavor is really big. It's really big. If you're not a fan of maple or really big, intense, flavor-forward beers, this may not be the one for you, but if you crave that, you are absolutely going to love this, assuming you like its constituent parts. But aside from the buttered waffle and maple, that's the obvious, I really do feel like I need to emphasize just how rich and deeply roasted this malt bill is, because this is such a tremendously well put together backbone. I mean, it's the foundation for this entire beer, this entire creation, and bravo. The malts chosen are absolutely top tier. The blend is exactly right. The ratios are exactly right. I mean, it's just delicious. It makes just this pastry, delicious, almost liquid breakfast, beer in a glass. It's just an absolute treat. There's not much else I can say about it. I absolutely love it. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. When we come back, we'll get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. Again, this is Listermann Brewing Company's 11, an Imperial Pastry Stout, clocking in at 11% ABV that was brewed with waffles, maple syrup, and lactose. Listermann Brewing Company is based in Cincinnati, Ohio. So starting with the aroma on this beer was absolutely huge. You got right up on it. I mean, you could smell it a foot and a half, 2 feet away, but when you got right up on it, just a massive aroma of maple and that rich underlying malt bill. It was fantastic. The aroma gets a 10 out of 10. For the taste, exactly as advertised. This tasted like buttered waffles and drown them in maple syrup, and you're eating that with a big old cup of a deeply, richly roasted cup of coffee. That's what this tasted like to me, and it was absolutely delicious. I really like their kind of nod to Stranger Things, great series, and taking inspiration from that, and it just made a fantastic beer. Taste, 10 out of 10. For the body on this beer was really large. Much larger than you would anticipate even for 11% ABV, and it totally worked in a big beer like this. Body gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel was equally as impressive as the body. It was very, very thick, very resistant. Upon agitation, it got even thicker, very creamy, velvety, silky. It was exactly what I wanted. The mouthfeel gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish, the flavors on this beer were very big, they were very bold, they were very pungent. The finish on this beer was much longer than your average beer, indeed much longer than your average flavored Imperial Stout, but maybe not quite as long as, say, some that are barrel-aged. You know, without that spirit backing it, it's really just intensity of flavor. And it was delicious and it was long, but not quite top tier. Finish does get a 9 out of 10. For the head and retention, this was just beautiful. One of the best heads that I've poured and that stuck around in quite a while. Head and retention gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, absolutely pitch black as expected. Appearance gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the balance overall, I absolutely loved on this beer. As I was really picking it apart and coming up with my scores for this one, really there was only one small thing that I would have said is, as great as the beer was, as well put together and as well balanced as it was, I would have liked just a little more presence from the waffles themselves comparative to the intensity of maple. You know, no knock on the brewer. Maple is a very intense flavor and it's hard to balance out other flavors with it. But that was the only nitpick, and that's very minor. Balance, I give a 9 out of 10. Filling in the intangible, subjectively, I loved it. I did give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Which brings us to an example of the style. Overall, this beer swept it in virtually all categories, just 1 point in 2. That's about as good as it gets for an Imperial Pastry, guys. Example of the style gets a perfect 10 out of 10, which brings the total score on Listermann Brewing Company's 11 to a 98 out of 100. This is just about Imperial Pastry Stout perfection for my money. I was an absolute fan. If you like that ingredient list, if you like pastry stouts, or indeed if you're just a fan of Stranger Things, check out this beer. They have a bunch of different versions. This is the standard. They do have a barrel-aged version. They have some other releases. Awesome, awesome beer. I highly recommend this one. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos drop, just click the notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.